Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you all to this very special book event. For those of you who are wondering why NORC is hosting this event, it's because of Walter Massey's special relationship to NORC. Not only is Walter a NORC Trustee Emeritus, having served as a trustee for many years, not once, but twice, but he's a mentor and a good friend of mine. And many of us at NORC have learned so much from Walter. And we're just a relative handful of the many lives that have benefited from Walter's leadership, his wisdom, advice, support, and kindness. So I jumped at the chance for NORC to be a stop on Walter's virtual book tour of his new book, In the Eye of the Storm. We're delighted and honored that he said yes. I'm just going to quickly go over the basic mechanics of the meeting. First, please introduce yourself in the chat. It's a great place to connect with others. And feel free to ask questions at any point during the event via the Q&A function. We're saving some time for questions at the end. Members of the NORC communications team are monitoring the Q&A and the chat, and they'll send your questions to me for the session at the end. Just know that Walter and Kerwin will not be viewing the chat or questions, so they can stay focused on their discussion. But they will be getting a transcript at the end of the event. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Kerwin Charles. Like Walter Massey, a good friend, and someone I've learned so much from over the years. Kerwin will introduce Walter, and we'll have a conversation with him about the book. Kerwin is the vice chair of NORC's board and the Indra K. Nui Dean and Frederick D. Wolf Professor of Economics, Policy, and Management at the Yale School of Management. Kerwin's expertise includes earnings and wealth inequality, race and gender labor market discrimination, intergenerational wealth transfer, worker and family adjustment to job loss and health shocks, and the labor market consequences of housing bubbles and sectoral change. He's a research associate at the National Bureau of Economic Research and an elected fellow of the Society of Labor Economics. He's also a member of the Federal Economic Statistics Advisory Committee and sits on the editorial board of the Journal of Labor Economics. Kerwin, thanks so much for being here, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Dan. Welcome, everyone. It is my privilege and pleasure today to introduce you to Dr. Walter E. Massey, someone whom I've long admired. Walter was born in Hattiesburg, Mississippi in 1938. He has lived through many highlights of recent American history. Life in the Jim Crow South, the Great Migration, the Cold War, the first moon landing, the civil rights movement of the 1960s, the financial crises of the 1980s and of 2008, 2009, the AIDS epidemic, the rise of the internet and personal computers, the iPhone, smartwatches, this year's global pandemic, the Black Lives Matter movement, to name a few. By any standard, Walter has had a glorious career in which he has made a tremendously positive impact on thousands of people's lives. He's a highly accomplished physicist and has held numerous science-related positions, including Director of the National Science Foundation, President of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and Head of the Argonne National Laboratories. His legacy as an educator and administrator in higher education is unparalleled. Walter has taught and held leadership positions at numerous colleges and universities, such as Morehouse College and the School of the Art Institute, where he is President Emeritus, University of Chicago, Brown University, and the California University System. And then there's his involvement with civic and cultural institutions, just such as the Chicago Symphony, the Smithsonian, the MacArthur Foundation, along with his work on corporate boards, which range from McDonald's, BP, Motorola, and Bank of America. Bank of America. That brings us to the topic of our discussion today. Walter was thrust into the spotlight and the hot seat of the financial meltdown and recovery efforts of 2008, 2009, when in 2009, he was unanimously elected chair of the Bank of America board, where he had already served 16 years as director. His spectacular new memoir, which I've just read, devoured is a better word, in the eye of the storm, is centered on that pivotal year, his year as chair of BOA. Walter, I'm delighted that you've agreed to spend some time to talk with us. We will get into the book. And to set the stage, before we start our conversation, why don't you give us a taste of the book, perhaps by describing it, or even better, maybe reading a little piece from it.
I'll do that. Thank you. Thank you, Dan and NORC, for having me here, and Kerwin. Two things that personal here. So, you know, Professor Charles is a native of Guyana, and my person who helped me write this book, professional writer, Rosalind McClement, is Guyanese.
Oh!
And you're the Indra K. Nui professor. And I first met Indra when she was working at Motorola, and I was on the Motorola. So I've known her since the 1980s. So you're in good company with her name. So I've been working on my memoirs over quite a bit of time. It's not as easy as you might think, those of you who haven't written. And I had written a large amount, practically my whole life, big, thick volume. But it was really almost a chronological description of my life. I was born in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, under severe segregation. I went to Morehouse, And when I took it to publishers, the reaction was, there's so much here. You know, you need to somehow give the reader a glimpse of stories of your life, not just a description. Yes. That's right. So we played around with that. And then 2009 came along, 2019. And there were all these news articles about 10 years later about the 2008-9 crisis. And I said, oh, well, we have this part of my career, a great important part is about Bank of America. So we decided, why don't we make the theme of Bank of America, and that would be sort of like a clothesline that goes through the book, but have look backs where we talk about other parts of my life. So there's a story, but the book is not all about Bank of America. It does go back and speak about my time growing up in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and segregation, some of the time being at Brown as the dean and professor, and touches on most of the things. What I hope to do in the future, as I say in the book, is to really, now that I've done that, go back and really expand on some of those other activities and episodes. For those who haven't read the book, I think one of the key things is how I became chairman. Even though I'd been on the board for 16 years, this was by not at all an orderly transition, as nothing was that year, 2009. So in 2008, September, Bank of America bought Merrill Lynch, which was then one of the largest independent investment firms in the country. And we bought it because the investment banks were on the verge of collapse. Lehman Brothers had collapsed that week before, the weekend that we bought Merrill Lynch. And there was great fear in the financial community that Merrill Lynch might be the one to collapse next, would have wreaked havoc for entity that large to collapse. So we bought the bank, and Merrill Lynch, and we, as a white knight, and we were encouraged, in fact, by the government to do that. But it wasn't received that way. The financial community thought we'd overpaid for it. And in fact, we found that Merrill had many more problems than we suspected. When we released our earnings in January of 2009, we found that Merrill had lost $15 billion, which now was on our balance sheet. Yeah. So it was not good. So at the shareholder meeting that April, the shareholders came really armed with the dissent. We were showered with lawsuits. But the one thing that they put on the proxy, it's called, the agenda to be voted on, was to separate the CEO and chairman positions. There had been one combined position, chairman and CEO, and that's the norm for American corporations.
Mhm.
So they want some, very few have the separate. And so they separated, they voted the shareholders, and the bank board, we're going to agree to do that. That was the morning of April 29th at the shareholder meeting. We were going to have the board meeting that afternoon to think about the appoint the new chairman. I hadn't been approached, and I was thinking, well, who am I going to vote for? And I said, well, I'm going to vote for Gary Countryman. He was the chairman of Liberty Mutual Insurance. So I'll just read you the section of when I learned that I was going to become chairman. So we're after the board meeting, we're on our way to the board room after the shareholders meeting. To get to the boardroom, we would have to exit the Blumenthal building, which opens up into an enclosed vaulted atrium, walk across the floor to the bank's corporate center, get on an elevator and ride up to the 30th floor, where the elevator opened onto a foyer that led to the boardroom itself. The foyer looks out over the Bank of America Stadium, headquarters of the National Football League, the Carolina Panthers. A small sitting area near the window offers a very pleasant view. And when I'm there, I usually pause to take it in. Not this morning, though. The meeting was about to start, and I had to go to the men's room. So I was walking towards the boardroom on my way back from the restroom. I saw Ken. Now, Ken Lewis was the then chairman and CEO of the bank, Ken Lewis. I saw Ken waiting in the foyer. He pulled me aside, and the other directors had already gone into the boardroom. Walter, you got a minute? Of course, I said, thinking this a bit unusual. Ken always started meetings punctual. We sat down on a little bench. I suspected he wanted to ask what I thought about so-and-so becoming chairman, but I was wrong. Ken said, Walter, and I don't remember his exact words, but it was either the executive committee or the governance committee met this morning, and we talked to the board, and we'd like for you to be our new chairman. And right then, it just didn't register. It's hard to describe the feeling. It's like something happening and you can't even reflect on it because the very idea is too surreal. Oh shit, I heard myself say. It just popped out. Ken looked at me. Are you serious? I asked, regaining composure. Yes. Ken, I said, I just don't think this makes any sense. I'm not a banker. We've just been accused of not having enough banking competence on the board. I don't think this is good for the bank. His response was, well, we've thought about it, Walter. People on the board admire you. People think you have a great sense of integrity. You have contacts nationally. You're well known. You've been on the board for almost 16 years. You understand how the board operates, and all of the directors have the utmost confidence in you. Are you sure? I was incredulous. Of course, he responded. We think you're the person. To Ken, it was like, this is so obvious. I don't see why you don't think it's obvious. And that's how he presented his reasoning. That made me feel a little more confident. If he had been at all tentative, I would have felt otherwise. But he wasn't. He was just matter of fact. Okay, you're sure? We're sure. I asked him how long I had to make up my mind. Ken looked directly into my eyes and said, about 2 minutes. So that's how I was notified. I was chairman. So I went into the room and they announced, started the meeting. The exec said the executive committee would recommend me as chairman. And after I'd relaxed a little, I thought, well, oh, wow, first of all, bank chairman of Bank of America, that's something.
Yes, it is.
Well, I can do it. I had been on other boards, Motorola, as I said, and McDonald's that had non-executive chair. And I thought, okay, I've seen what a non-exec chair does. You preside over the meetings, you have set the agenda, you organize the committees, you act on behalf of the bank, and you're not running the bank, you're not management, you're chair of the board. And it usually took about 2 days a week. So I said, okay, I can do that. I'm still in Chicago. I'll fly to Charlotte and 2 days a week, and I can do this. Well, that turned out to be a total misconception of what the job turned out to be. So maybe I'll skip to where that starts, Kerwin. Okay,
Yes, let's touch on that. Or yes, let's do that. Then I have some
Oh,
questions.
you would like to ask questions about that? Okay.
We'll come back to that.
Right.
Sort of once you take on the job.
Right.
One of the things as you described, the Bank of America chairmanship is the clothesline, the thread that around which you stitch biographical detail in the way you've crafted the book.
Right.
I really love that. Something I especially love is the powerfully moving eloquence with which you describe your beginnings, your childhood,
yes,
your family, your education. A question I'd like to ask you before we get started is to talk to us about the importance of that grounding, your family and the education you received in boyhood, in launching you for the careers, notice the plural, that you would go on to have.
It's very interesting. Thanks. Question. I flash back after this to my growing up in Hattiesburg and describe my childhood. When I began writing the book, I had written versions of it that showed to people who professional writer, a woman who really helped me think through it. And she pointed out something that I hadn't fully realized, that when you're writing a memoir, it's almost like you have to rediscover yourself. You're looking in your past, but you're looking at it not through the eyes of the person who's a character, but through the eyes of who you are now. How, and 50, 60 years later, how do you describe realistically what an 8 or 9-year-old is thinking as an 8 or 9-year-old?
Yeah.
So that was the fascinating part of writing this. And I even went back and talked to my oldest childhood friend, who still both same age alive, Ralph, who I grew up with, who experienced everything I experienced, because we were the closest friends growing up. And he validated my memories, which was very good. So what was it? And one of the things you will see if you read it is I say, I had a pretty happy childhood. Now people will say, so what? Well, Hattiesburg in the 1940s and 50s, Mississippi, was the most segregated, probably state in the Union, one of the harshest. You couldn't go to many places. You couldn't shop at many stores. And people have read this, even if you're younger. Water fountains labeled colored and white. Going in the back door, you never went in the front door of a white person's house. My grandmother was a domestic, and I found out, I thought years later, it occurred to me I'd never gone in that front door, even when I went with her. I went with her to work until I was about 4 and played with the kids, the Morris family, who she worked for, a little boy and a little girl about my age. When I was about 4, my grandmother said, you can't come with me anymore because the Morrises think you're getting too old to be around their daughter, who was 4. The worst thing, most dangerous thing you could do in Mississippi was to look askance or to be seen to be looking inappropriately at a white woman. Schools were segregated, everything was segregated. So how could I be happy? I had a good family. My grandmother was a domestic, but we had a close family. We lived community where my cousins lived. My mother was a school teacher and then became an elementary school principal. And for most of your one's life in a place like that, you aren't constantly interacting with white people. You're interacting with them when you go downtown or you go shop or you ride a bus or that kind of thing. But a great part of your life is in your community. And we had a close-knit community and I had a very close family. And my mother was a remarkable person. Now, the schools, they were segregated, but we had excellent teachers. And it's the chaotic fact that brings that about. The universities in Mississippi were segregated, and none of the Black universities, Jackson State, Alcorn, had graduate schools. Ole Miss and Mississippi State did. Teachers, black and white, were encouraged to go back to graduate school to get degrees, so they could get more accreditations, your salary would go up. The state of Mississippi and some other southern states would pay for the black teachers to go out of state rather than allow them to go to Mississippi State and Ole Miss. So our teachers, many went to northern school, which were much better.
Oh, fascinating. I see.
My high school principal in junior high, Mr. Berger, got a master's from Cornell.
Wow.
Other teachers would go to Michigan, Illinois, et cetera.
Right.
So we had good teachers in spite of the fact that we had
Mississippi imposed its segregation.
Right.
Yeah.
It made how these things backfire.
Indeed.
Yeah. But
Walter,
go ahead.
I'm sorry for interrupting. You are a Morehouse man.
Yes.
Yeah? You're a Morehouse man, and you're a Morehouse man in multiple ways. You went to Morehouse. Yeah. Morehouse was a place that you led later on. It's a university, this hugely important HBCU, launched you on your career as a physicist, one might argue. Indeed, I am arguing. I'm wondering if you could give us a few words about Morehouse's role in your path, that part of your background, that special university to you.
Without Morehouse College, I would not be where I am. I reflect back on that all the time. I went to Morehouse from the 10th grade. I didn't finish high school. That's another story, I speak about in the book. And it was really serendipitous. I took an exam, and that was offered by the Ford Foundation nationally, and I happened to get the scholarship, the only one from Mississippi. So I went off to Morehouse, just turned 16. I hadn't had physics, calculus, trigonometry, so many things, because I hadn't been in the 11th or 12th grade. When I arrived at Morehouse, freshman week, I was so afraid that I called my mother and told her I wanted to come home. She said, no, they wouldn't have chosen you if you couldn't do the work. I just didn't believe it could, because all the other students there were 14 other early admission students, but they were just seeing so much smarter than me and had taken so many other courses, and they were from big cities. And we had a placement exam that all freshmen had to take, 120 of us. It was a small school then. And they placed the result of the placement exam on the front door of the freshman dorm by name, by rank, from the number 1 to 120. Of course, you never do that today. You wouldn't embarrass people. Right. So I went to look, and when they placed them, and I saw these names: number 1, William Churchill, Phil Thompson, 2, William Churchill, and it was number 5, Walter Massey. And I was just blown over. I just I couldn't believe it. And it was the first time in my life that I thought, well, I might be smart. Even though I hadn't done a lot of things, that I might have some native, intellect. And after that, I really began to gain confidence in my abilities. And so I sort of, went into the studies at Morehouse. I got a great liberal education. Things I learned there were really how important a sense of curiosity, how important it is to have confidence in yourself. Morehouse gives you that. It's a saying, you can always tell a Morehouse man, but not much.
I've never heard that.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah. I got my physics background there from Sabinus Christensen, a white Harvard professor who had come down to teach at a historically Black schools. Many did that then. And I got a great liberal education. I learned about things that I just never heard about. I now learned that all religions weren't Baptist or even Christian, right? Learned about art and music. Right. So Morehouse was a foundation, really, for practically everything in the life.
That's really great. Reading the book, and again, it really is a delightfully constructed memoir. I mean, one of the things the reader is struck by is the sheer number of career-defining opportunities that are presented to you, or that you come across and that you seize and then go on to excel at. And I'm reading this thing and I'm thinking, it takes a lot of fearlessness, Walter, to jump into becoming head of Argonne. It takes a lot of spine to become chairman of a board or serve on a board. It takes a lot of spunk to become a university president. I can go on. Yeah. One of the reasons fearlessness is required, of course, is one has to overcome the self-doubt that you touched on. Seeing that evidence of your 5th place ranking was one thing that would have gotten you over. But more generally, when these opportunities came before you, how did you fearlessly seize them? And how did you get over the self-doubt we all have when opportunities present themselves to us?
Well, it wasn't that I was fearless, I'll tell you that. I was quite, if not fearful, surely I got a great sense of trepidation. And it wasn't all at once, and I'm still not there. But I sort of grew in confidence. As you do something, you do that, and that gives you confidence for the next step. In addition to that, I had a great deal of mentors throughout my life. Something I learned very early. I would really reach out to people when an opportunity was about to come or did come, and ask their advice, and sort of get a feeling, am I really ready for this? Or what do you think? What do you think I should take it? So this, almost none of my decisions have been, just me by myself leaping fearlessly into the abyss. But I have gained this sense of confidence about says to me, you can do something, you can tackle new things. I got a sense of confidence of getting a PhD in physics. So getting a PhD in anything is no minor undertaking, but theoretical physics it really is a difficult subject, even if I like math myself. And so I would say to myself, when things happen, look, if you can do that, you can do this. You just apply some of the same principles. One, as a way to problem solve, and you work your way through. You do the first thing, you take the next step. You can't solve everything at once, but if you know this system, you figure that out and the parameters, then if you have confidence, if you keep doing that, you will get to a point where you master it.
I see.
That's one of the methods that I've used.
I promise I'm going to ask about the BOA experience, but before I do that, I have to ask about, there are many things you touch on really beautifully in the book, and throughout there is your description of your beautiful relationship with your wife, Shirley, and your marriage.
Yes.
Walter, you and Shirley moved all over the place. Providence, Chicago, there's a lot of moving, okay? And one reads it and gets the sense that you could not have achieved all you did without her support, her guidance, and so forth. Before I ask you details about the BOA chairmanship, I want to ask you, first of all, how did you get Shirley to make all these moves? And then what role did she play in helping you navigate the challenges you confronted over your career? What role has she played?
Played a major role, as I described in the book. We've been married 51 years this year, October.
Congrats.
Thank you very much. And I went into theoretical physics. I liked math, but another reason I did it, and this is a prelude to the answer, is I liked being alone. I like working alone. I really like the almost mystical experience you get when you're struggling to deal with a problem. And the theoretical physics, you're working pretty much by yourself, pen and pad. Then I had computers, but a lot is pen and pad mathematical equation. And you work with colleagues, but the problem you're working on is yours. And I just love that experience. And I wouldn't say was drawn, but I was not a particularly outgoing person. I didn't need or relish being other people. It's the total opposite of Shirley. So when we got married, she began to give me this sense of the confidence, but also the enjoyment of people, of learning, to deal with people. And that's important because in my jobs after physics all had to do with dealing with people.
Got
You
it.
know, every job, dean, director of a laboratory, member of heading up a board, any of these, no matter what the entity or the subject or whether they're making hamburgers or cell phones, people begin to count. And I learned a lot about my people skills from Shirley. And she had been working with TWA when we got married as international reservation. She knows about moving. But after I became dean, she really became a partner because every job I had since then, didn't require me to be by myself. So whenever I speak of things I've accomplished after that point, I always say we, meaning the two of us.
Yes. Yeah. Very beautiful. So Walter, let me get back to the BOA experience for a bit. Okay. So one of the most nerve-wracking stories you recount in the book is when you were summoned by the Fed down to Richmond. Okay. And you describe the trip as seeming like incredibly high stakes version of being called to the principals. Yeah. I think the deal was that you got a phone call that's inviting you to come meet them at the Fed. Yeah. I wonder if you can speak to us about that call, its impact on your life, and why it proved to be such a central aspect of the story you relate.
Good. So I'll read you a couple of pages, which I think
okay.
Is. So this is, that's it. So I learned, this is a day after that I learned that the job that I thought the two days a week job would not be like that. I received a call from Chad Gifford, who was on the board, and he said I would be getting a call from Kevin Warsh at the Federal Reserve in Washington. And I hung up. 15 minutes later, Kevin called. I'll read now. I had never met Kevin Warsh, but I knew his name. He was the governor of the Federal Reserve and the right-hand man of Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke. He was a wunderkind in the financial circles. He had worked at Morgan Stanley and then became a special assistant to President George W. Bush for economic policy. When he was appointed to the Federal Reserve Board in 2006 at age 35, he was the youngest appointee in the history of the Fed. First of all, congratulations, he said, and congratulations from the chairman, Bernanke. I want you to know we think this is a good choice and we are behind you. I had heard of Kevin, but haven't met him. And Kevin went on to say, I want to give you a message, he said to me on the phone. You need to know that the message comes from the OCC, the Office of the Control of the Currency, the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and the Treasury, as well as the Fed. He didn't say you should know, he said you need to know. So this was serious. And he said, well, you're going to get a call from the president of the Federal Reserve Bank in Richmond. I said, okay. So the Federal Reserve president in Richmond, Richard Lacker, called me about 20 minutes after that. This was a Thursday afternoon. I'd been elected chairman on the Wednesday and said, I would like for you to come to Richmond, the office of the Fed for our district. And you need to bring maybe 4 or 5 other directors with you because I'm going to give you some news that when you take back to your board, you don't want to take this message back alone. So that's how we were summoned to Richmond. And we, at the meeting in Richmond, we were given news about the state of the bank, which we had not heard. That told us things we had to do were much more serious than we had anticipated, I had anticipated, in terms of changing the board, changing some of the management structures, the risk operations, paying back $35 billion, paying $35 billion for stress tests, and on, which I described. But the thing that stands out to me from that was sitting in this boardroom, Richard Lacker and his team on one side, and me and my 3 guys, one on the phone on this side. And he looks at me and said, after giving us this stack of materials, we were to take that.
Mhm.
That Dr. Massey, I just want you to know we have confidence in you, Chairman, Banak, and all of us. But come Thursday, when you announce the results of the stress test, the entire financial community is going to be looking at you. That sort of sent chills. Now, this is less than 2 days after. So the rest of the book describes what my group of people, 4 of us and myself, who became a special committee, what we had to do over this next year to carry out the mandate given to us.
Yeah, I urge listeners to read the book because it's described so beautifully. I have to ask you something. So I said earlier, you're a Morehouse man. And now I'm gonna say, Walter, you're a Black man. You're a Black man, as am I. One reads the book, as I did, and notices that there is, on the one hand, no hiding from that fact. There is no underselling of the fact. You're growing up in the Jim Crow South. You talk about it. There's no hiding from it. Nor is there, however, any reference in the book that I can remember to racism. You don't talk about it at length. I don't remember a description of its operation. But I know that a Black man moving into these spaces would have been one of the few Black faces there. How did you navigate that rarity? What challenge, if any, did race pose to you in these rarefied spaces? And how do you navigate them, Walter, over your incredible career?
It's very, very interesting, something that everybody asks that, and something I think about a lot. Of course, you're constantly in a racist environment. And I think something about my growing up in Mississippi, with just such severe racism, that once you get out of that, it's like you have so much more freedom. Once you start to drink out of a colored fountain, and you can go to the front door, you sort of just do it. So I was not one of those people, I am not, that to sort of see, racism everywhere. And I thought to myself, and even Shirley and I, that there were probably times when people were doing things that if I had paid attention, I would have picked up, but I just didn't pay attention. If they were doing it or not. So in physics, I was in theoretical physics, and I had a white mentor, Sabinus Christensen, and my graduate director in WashU were Eugene Feinberg, was my thesis director, who was excellent. I think in many ways I encountered people that I was lucky in many ways. There are so many people, Blacks especially, who drop out of graduate school, especially in the sciences, because they don't feel welcome. They don't feel that the people believe they can do it. I didn't have that. I wanted to quit. I wasn't always fearless. I wanted to quit in the middle of my PhD because I just thought I just couldn't do it.
How did you get through that, Walter?
I went to my office. I was almost in tears to Professor Feinberg. And I just said, I just don't think I can do this. It was such a difficult problem. I've been working on it for about 3 years. And he said, why would you do that? I said, well, I don't feel I'm getting anywhere. He said, but I think you're making very good progress. I said, with 3 years. He said, some people, that's not that long. He said, I don't think you should do that. This is going to be a very important piece of work. And I remember the word. He said, I think it's going to be a monumental piece of work. And had that. So I described my episode down in Illinois, working with the Black Student Associations, and then trying to do things for inner city schools to provide a program there for teachers of inner city schools. But you're right, I have not harbored some of the inner anger that I know others of my generation, other males particular, harbor. And I once received a letter, which I'm quoting the letter, a white friend of mine that served on the Mellon board, who was president of William and Mary University. And he wrote and said, I really like working with you. It's hard for me to understand how you could be so gracious, and I forgot the exact words, with all of us whites growing up in an environment that you did. I'm glad I am like I am. I don't, ignore racism, but I happen to, I have some fortunate set of circumstances that didn't leave me and doesn't leave me bitter. It makes me angry, makes me very angry. I describe an incident in the book where a white policeman killed my dog, my grandmother.
Yeah, oh yeah, I remember that story, Walter. Yeah.
And, I was told that this dog, German Shepherd named Lady, would be left by my crib when I was playing, when I was 2 years old, 3 maybe, for protection, that they could leave me on the front porch and go away and protect. Well, the policeman wanted to buy the dog, and my grandmother wouldn't sell her. And I remember one day going down to the garbage place from my house, and the dog was laying there, bloody and in maggots, with maggots all out, sorry God, and had been shot. And what happened, the police had just shot her and killed her because my grandmother wouldn't sell her. And, someone asked me about it, and I said, well, because I say in the book, I didn't really appreciate that there were people who were so evil, who had so much power, they could do what they wanted. And of course, that reminded me of George Floyd. And he said, so you could kill a dog, you can kill a human being, a Black male. So no, these things resonate with me. They make me angry, as I say.
Yes.
Hopefully I can help in some way, right?
Yes, your example, believe me, you've been a wonderful example to me and many other Black persons who hope to follow in at least some of your footsteps. So let me say that to you directly. Walter, a thing I learned in the book about you, I know I want to get questions from others, but we rarely get a chance to chat like this. You love tennis. I didn't know this about you.
Oh, yeah.
And you describe your love of the sport and it being a release for you and so forth. Given the number of times you mentioned your love for the sport, I thought I've got to ask you to talk for a minute or two as a fellow tennis lover about that passion before I turn it over to questions from the audience.
Well, unfortunately, I had 2 knee operations, 2 new knees 3 years ago, and I cannot play anymore, which is really one of the biggest disappointments in my life. I learned to play, I didn't learn to play until late. I was in graduate school. My best friend, person who introduced me to Shirley on a blind date, which I talk about, Avon Kirkland, great tennis player. He taught me how to play tennis. I found it to be a wonderful game, as you know, as you play.
Yeah, I played poorly.
Relaxing, but it's challenging. It's just wonderful exercise. It's a year-long round game. It's a lifetime game unless something physically happens with my knees. And I suffer from high blood pressure, have for a while, and high cholesterol. And I just have to do physical exercise. And I found doing physical exercise also helps me with stress. So that's what I talk about in the book, especially during the Bank of America episode. And I would use tennis as this release, but also a way to just take your mind off things.
Yes.
It's someone once described skiing to me as mind evacuating. Because you can't worry if you're going down that mountain.
About that physics problem.
That mountain, right?
Exactly.
And so even that in tennis too, if you're gonna really be engaged, it takes your mind off.
Walter, listen, I feel badly about not leaving time for others. I will have Dan ask one of my questions. You can ask and answer my question during your comments with him. It is a wrap-up question. What is the lesson or the 2 lessons that your biography provides to a young college graduate, to someone beginning their career? Is there an overarching lesson? There need not be, but there might be. And if there is, I'd love for you to share with us. But mindful of the time, I'm going to turn it over to Dan and he will treat my last question as the first question from the audience.
Okay.
Walter, my pleasure to talk to you, my friend.
Kerwin, thank you so much for that wonderful discussion leading, and I will follow your direction. I've learned that's always a good move. So Walter, you have your first question, and it's Kerwin's last.
I don't think there's one overarching thing, but as I said at the end, I hope people who read it, especially people who are not finished with their careers, professional careers in life, can learn by looking at examples of what someone else has done, and maybe learn that if things are possible, that you don't have to shy away from taking risks, moving into new areas, and also try to go into enough detail about how I was feeling at those points, so a person can think, well, if I'm at this point and I'm feeling this, that's okay. Someone else, or maybe I should look at it this way. That it gives them people, readers, a sense of confidence, and I use the word courage, although that may be overblown, to have in tackling new things. And the joy actually you get from doing something new, from learning. I stress here also what I learned at Morehouse, and I appreciate the rest of my life. I really learned how to learn. I went out of 10th grade, and things I had to learn on my own while I was in college, but I learned how to do that. At least I started to learn how to do that. And so that's the facility. Knowing you can learn things and having the confidence that you can is really more important than one might think.
Wonderful. You know, Walter, you can't see the chat, but there are so many lovely comments from so many people who are watching right now, and I'm excited that we'll be sharing a transcript of it with you, because I know you will enjoy that. Kerwin, just wonderful moderating. Thank you so much. I have the pleasure of just going through a couple of the wonderful questions we have from the many people watching. Here is one from Herbert Jacobs, and he says, Dr. Massey, as a trained physicist and scientist, what skill set did you develop that allowed you to transition into administration, academia, and finance business, since they're so different in so many ways?
I hit on this earlier. I think one thing I said my physics training gave me, one, it gave me a sense of confidence that I could learn things and I could master difficult concepts. Now, that doesn't allow you to deal with people so much. The physics doesn't do that, but it does give you that sort of confidence. The other I learned, and I mentioned a little bit about this, I apply, is how to tackle complex problems, knowing that you don't necessarily have to see the end solution right away. And I learned that in physics. In fact, there are some brilliant people who are so intuitive that they can look at a physics problem and say, oh, that end has to be like that. I'm not one of those. But I was one of those that look, if I start here, what do I have to know? What do I have to know first? And I work through it. So the example in the bank or in any other, I use the bank, when we came out of the meeting in Richmond and we were told we had to do all these things, I mean, we were very confused. We didn't know what to do. First, we were shocked that we were in this position. And I immediately started to think, well, what do we do now? You know, I'm not get overly burdened by the big problem. You can't do that. Just, what am I going to do now? And what do you do that? You do the next thing. And as you go along, you learn, you know, and you see other ways through it. So I learned that from physics.
Very helpful. Okay, thank you. So here's one that sort of cuts across several questions. There are a lot of questions, as you would imagine, given current focus on social justice issues. The questions amount to, Walter, what can we do to increase the number of African American leaders in the financial services sector, in STEM graduate programs, and in leadership positions generally in our society and our country?
Oh boy.
Tiny question.
Well, there's so many things we can do. And you know, what's interesting, I think now, we're beginning to see some things done. And I find it fascinating, almost every day in the New York Times, you pick up the paper and you'll see some African-American person, or maybe Asian now, being appointed to a position where years ago they wouldn't have been. It was not that there was no one available then, it just didn't do it. The young woman, the University of Chicago graduate, not that young, I guess, general manager of the Miami Marlins, but you see Blacks being promoted in the cultural industries, the museums, cultural sector, and these people were around. I mean, it's not as if, you know, they just spouted up yesterday. They weren't noticed, they weren't given the opportunities. So one thing that can be done is, you know, keep putting attention on operations of companies, corporations, universities, so that they will begin to do this and take it seriously, and hopefully they will. I gave a speech to the Sigma Xi Corporation, which is the nation's largest research organization, last week. And I pointed out that 50 years ago, when I was the first Black professor of physics at Brown, and now 50 years later, Brown has 2 Black professors, which is infinitely more than most places, because most have 0. I mean, it's good that Brown has 2, but and that there are universities that use physics in the country, several that have never had a Black professor of physics in their entire history, and have never graduated a Black PhD in their entire history. I don't know that, but I took bets, and I'll take bets now that, and you could probably find other fields. Now, so those in our communities, education, we have to make sure we have a supply of people, so we don't allow the institutions to say, well, we can't find anybody. So the pipeline is important in all areas. But I think a lot of us used to believe that you had to put the whole emphasis on the pipeline. I moved beyond that. I think after all of this time, 50 years, 60 for me in the profession, there are enough people out there sufficiently qualified that institutions, that they ought to be able to find some.
That's a really good call to action. I'm going to try and slip in one more question here, which is sort of a variation on the theme of this previous one, but with, I think, a really nice subtle difference. And it's being asked by several people in the audience. And it amounts to, you've talked about the importance of mentorship in your life. And I think there are a number of young people listening today who would like some advice on how to seek out mentors. And particularly, I think there is an emphasis for people of color trying to seek out the right mentors, how they should go about doing that.
What's the question, Dan?
Oh, could you not hear it? Could you not hear me,
I
Walter?
heard what you said. I didn't hear a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. So the question is, how should young people who are looking for mentors go about that? What is their approach that they should take to find mentors and get their help?
Okay. Well, first of all, I think you should reach out. If you observe people, whatever you're in, whatever situation you're in, you can observe them. Sometimes you can pick up hints as to whether this is the kind of person that you admire or whom you feel you could learn something from. And you have to approach them. That's not easy to do when you're very young, but I think once you make that step, you really learn a lot. And I have found, and I think young people have found, that most people, not all, but most people are flattered to be asked to mentor. I wouldn't use the word mentor, but to give feedback and to help others, to help someone in particular, and don't see it as a burden. Some do, and of course you have to take the risk, you'll be rejected. The other thing is, I would point out, is that I would not confine myself to a mentor of my own racial group if you don't fit. Feinberg, Christensen, one of my mentors, lives right here in Chicago. Hannah Gray, former president of the University of Chicago, important mentor in my life, white woman. So I've had mentors across all races and ethnic groups.
Wonderful. Well, in the interest of time, I'm going to sadly have to wrap us up. I just can't thank Walter and Kerwin enough. As you can tell just from this brief session today, we at NORC and all of your friends and colleagues watching today are incredibly blessed to have the two of you in our orbits and as your friends and our mentors. And we thank you so much for sharing some of your time with us today. I know that I learned many things, as I always do, interacting with the two of you. And certainly one thing I saw demonstrated in abundance today is how Walter is probably, you know, they say that people have 7 degrees of separation. I think Walter has a half a degree of separation from anybody on the planet. So a very special thank you to Walter Massey and Kerwin Charles. Walter's book, In the Eye of the Storm, is available on Amazon. This concludes our program. A big thank you to all of you for watching, and again to our speaker and discussant. Have a great day, early happy Thanksgiving, and please stay safe.
Thank you all. Very good. Thanks for coming, Dan, Kerwin, Allison.